Welcome to the Gird Up podcast. My name is Charlie Ungemach. I'm the founder and curator of Gird Up. I'm very excited about my guest today, as always. But before we get there, I got to ask you to consider helping support the work that we do here at Gird Up. You can make a cup of coffee donation. We call it a cup of coffee donation because for the price of a cup of coffee, you can help support the ministry we're doing here at Gird Up as we flood the internet with confessional content and help prepare the people of God for whatever lies ahead. If you'd like to support or help fund the conversations we're having here at Gird Up, go to www.girdupministries.com, select buy us a cup of coffee in the main menu, and make your donation there. Thank you to those of you who have done so already. It's wonderful to be supported, and it's wonderful that these things get funded. So, for example, the domain name on the website is coming up for renewal. Those kinds of expenses come up, and then also it's just maintaining equipment, keeping all the platforms and everything engaged. So if you're willing to do so and you want to see more content like this, please consider supporting the show. Now, back on the show again is Mr. Cameron Schroeder.
Thanks for having me, Charlie.
Man?
Good to be here.
Yeah, it's fun to have you one-on-one a little bit because we see each other in the hallways and we're around class and things like that. But just to sit, it's always fun to sit down with your buddies and just chat for a while.
Absolutely.
So it's refreshing to do this too.
Totally.
Give us a little bit of life update here. What's going on in Cameron's life?
So loving life at Wisconsin Lutheran Seminary. Charlie and I are in the same class, different classrooms, but going through kind of the same season. Lots of awesome classes and great things to think about. Lots and lots of thinking all the time. So definitely using our brains and growing a lot. Looking forward to Vicar call assignments in about a month and a half or so. And so especially I got married in June, and so doing life with my wife Kyrie, it's something that comes up quite a bit in conversation right now, just kind of letting ourselves dream a little bit about what next year could look like and where we could be and stuff like that.
Yeah. How you feeling about Vicar Call Day?
Feeling good, honestly. Both Kyrie and I have a fairly sizable spark of adventure in our hearts, and so we're up for going anywhere. And I really, really think whether we're close to home or as far away as possible, I think we're just really excited to kind of bloom where we're planted for 1 year and just make the most of it.
Yeah, I didn't realize how much I need to just kind of get out of the classroom until the last couple of weeks here. And man, like they're good. I love being a student at the seminary. But man, you're sitting in classrooms is getting harder and harder every day, and I'm getting more and more excited about getting back out there and getting to business.
I found myself last week while writing a sermon for Preach this spring, just wishing that it wasn't another homework assignment, that there would be so much more time to really dedicate to that craft and art form. So that's a huge perk of next year is we're going to get to go and do 25 or so. And that's hard to imagine how much growth will happen through producing like a body of work like that.
Well, and even I'm preaching for chapel tomorrow. I also preached on Sunday, and it just happens to be the same text, which I was a little disappointed about at first because I want to do another sermon prep. I enjoy that. But now I'm thankful for it. And I also noticed like writing a chapel for the seminary student body, which is all guys I know, like I'm writing with them. And like, you can talk in homiletics class. They talk about like, oh, it's different when you're writing for people, it really is different when you're writing for, like, I can see the faces that I'm talking to while I'm writing the sermon versus like writing a generic sermon that I'm going to preach in 6 different places. And I'm excited to preach it, and it went well on Sunday and so forth. But recognizing that I'm speaking to a specific group of people who I know, and I know their needs, and I know what's on their minds and their hearts, that makes a whole big difference too. And I'm excited to be doing that then in a congregation next year.
Or every other week.
I'm pumped. Yeah.
You nervous about it or mostly excited?
No, I have had zero nerves at all about it. My only, I don't want to say concern, and I've said this before, but my only like pause is I just really want a good relationship with my bishop. I really crave that. I really crave that mentorship relationship. And I just straight up don't know how to be a professional pastor. I know how to be a professional in other fields. I know how to be a professional teacher. I know how to be a professional student. I know how to be a professional in other areas. But being a professional pastor specifically, like I know guys have different needs, and so there's different bishops that kind of serve different purposes. I'm really just hoping for a bishop that will I mean, take me under his wing,
Yeah.
give me stuff to do, but who I'm learning from, not
Mhm.
necessarily a bishop who's like just gives me a list of things and says, "Go get after it." And there's some guys that need that, and if they decide that's what I need, then so be it, and I'll go do it, and I
Yeah.
trust the process.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's what I think about that more than anything else.
Yeah.
But also, like the better I get to know the men who make those decisions, the more I trust them to make the right
Yeah.
decision.
Absolutely.
And of course, the Lord's hand is in all of it as well. Yeah.
It's coming crazy fast. It's gonna be here soon.
Yep. It's exciting. It's exciting. Okay, so part of the reason that you're on the show is we're going to talk about Viktor Frankl's
Mhm.
Man's Search for Meaning. But it's not the first book that you and I have kind of bonded over as far as, I don't want to say self-help books, but even just like mental health books and things like that. So if you don't mind, you want to share a little bit of your personal history
Sure.
before we jump into
Yeah.
this?
Absolutely. Honestly, I was trying to think of, like, what would be the book that we've bonded over, but I think there you and I have just shared resources for years now, and so, yeah, I guess going back to my time at Martin Luther College, especially freshman year, just got kind of absolutely walloped by mental health issues, depression, anxiety, and ended up kinda just shutting down for a little bit. Ended up going to the clinic in town and just basically saying, "I feel absolutely broken, like, I'll do whatever you tell me to do." Walked out with a full prescription and a counseling appointment with a counselor there at the clinic. Very quickly found out that counseling in the secular field was not what I needed. My spiritual health was way out of whack too, and I was not getting kind of the holistic, full picture support from them that I was looking for. Got with a Christian counselor, ended up getting off the meds, it just wasn't right for me, and what the Christian counselor really did for me that seemed to work was he gave me a reading list, and so books like Telling Yourself the Truth by William Backus and Marie Chapin, I'm sure I didn't pronounce that right, but, Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, that was a little bit more of a tough love sorta vibe, but books like that that really just gave my life a compass. I started to realize that it was less that my brain was broken and more that the way that I was structuring and approaching my life was sort of broken. It was my first time living alone, and it wasn't that I was homesick or making, like, radically bad choices, but I just was living it up socially. I was going to Quick Trip at midnight with people, like, 3 nights a week, and just, like, getting a whole pizza and eating it in our car, like, at midnight, and it was like, "This is college, like, I'm having so much fun, I'm getting to know people," and then I'm, you know, for some reason in the afternoon scratching my head wondering why it feels like the sky is falling and, you know, ma immature 18-year-old mind trying to kinda grapple with some of those things, and the whole culmination of it was just me not being in a good spot. So, I think a lot of the podcasts and the books and stuff that that counselor recommended, and then getting some good guys around me, yourself included, really just helped kind of not only pull me out of that place, but then move forward with a better plan, stronger support, and all that stuff. And then I guess more down the line, some things we've bonded over, a love for guys like Lewis and both his writings, more in a nonfiction philosophical realm, but then also his love for story. I'm a huge Lewis Tolkien fan, all that stuff, and I know that's something we've bonded over too. So, but yeah,
I've got a couple follow-ups. I think the what do you when you say you were just kind of broken when you showed up in the clinic, what does that mean?
yeah, I think I was at a loss for what to do. Um, I my family, the way that we all sort of operate in my house is that we are willing to ask and answer the tough questions, and so, growing up, if I was going through a rough patch at school behaviorally or going through a hard time with friends or whatever, I'd go home and I'd get certainly a hug and, an "Are you okay?" from mom and dad, but also, like, what can you do in this situation? How can you affect change? You can't control their actions, but you can control how you respond. Yeah. So over the years, I was really able to kind of cope and respond to situations, I think, at a high level for a young guy, especially. Just like learned those problem solving skills, learned my own emotional needs pretty well, or so I thought. Well, then I find myself at MLC at a place that I had been dreaming of going to for the last couple of years. I was so excited to start studying to be a pastor. Um, I had a decent community around me from my time at Camp Phillip. A lot of them went to school there too. But still, I was in this place where I would look around and just say, everything around me gives me every reason to be totally comfortable and doing well. And yet I'm not. And not only that, but I have no clue like what to do next. Like if you would ask me, what can you do to affect change in the situation? You know, what action can you take to to make this better? I would have had no words for you. And so I think it was like I hesitate to use the term rock bottom because people have it way worse than I had it as far as what that looks like.
And as soon as you proclaim something to be rock bottom, just
Right. Yeah.
wait a few days and
Yeah,
see.
exactly. But that was the bottom of that particular pit where I had to get to just kind of be like, okay, I don't have all the tools I need in my toolbox. There's more out there for me to find. So, really, I think at every stage of life since then, I've been able to maybe stay hungry in a way that's been useful to know that even when I'm in a season of really great emotional or mental resilience, that as a man who's constantly trying to better himself and also as a future pastor and a husband and Lord willing a future father, like I can never read one too many books or listen to one too many podcasts about kind of this pursuit of wellness and excellence. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So my read on you, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong or if you want to tweak it, but my read on you and your brother, just kind of observing both of you, because you have a lot in common and you are unique compared to the rest of the world, I would say, especially like American Midwestern culture. Like not entirely unique in the way you're put together, but certainly unique to be like operating. I can't think of what this is. Operating at the level at which you guys operate at the age at which you guys are operating, and then to have two of you in one family, and like the two kids in the family, both, I mean, go getters, getting things done. Like if you're gonna use like an engine term, like you guys, the throttle is just wide open all the time, right?
Yeah.
And you seem to have something unlocked in your mind or in, I don't know, like in yourself that a lot of the rest of us struggled to unlock, right? And it also seems, just watching you, it also seems like maybe that opens the door to some of this other stuff too, right? Can you just talk? Do you know what I'm talking about when I say that?
Yeah, yeah.
Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think to continue using your car analogy, which I probably shouldn't do because I don't know that much about cars, but you probably don't want to have the throttle wide open forever. And when you do, eventually something is going to break or go wrong. I mean, that's the case with anyone who's firing on all cylinders. I mean, there's a reason that Jesus himself talks about rest in scripture and even commands it. And that's something that I've had to learn the hard way over and over again. So I think it comes down to knowing yourself really well. There have been different seasons of life where rest looked different for me. I used to be way more able to like actually recharge in the presence of other people, and like I was a true extrovert where really like those quick trip runs, if it weren't for the fact that I wasn't losing tons of sleep, or the fact that I was losing tons of sleep, that would have been the best thing. Like just s- school, setting school aside, setting everything aside, I'm just going and investing in people, they're investing in me, we're having stupid fun. But then uh, you realize that you're a human being with limits. And so, yeah, I think Elliot and I, my brother Elliot and I, we definitely, what you're saying is true that I don't know if it's the way we were raised or maybe our closeness in age and the way that we've always been close friends, that there's just always this kind of not competition, but like sort of just this assumption like that we're trying to make the most of every single season of life. We have a high value placed on like creation as well. Like I want to be adding something to the world that's meaningful all the time. For him, that's uh, crazy video projects and just making music with any people that he can find. And oftentimes it's things that nobody asked for, but then they see them and then they start asking for them, you know? For me, lately it's been trying to be the best husband and pastor I can be and just really preparing for the moment when, I just kind of get the green light to go get them. And maybe that's the limit that I run up against most of the time these days is the consistent reminder of like, but hey, you're not a pastor yet, and that's okay. And, you know, God kind of nudging me and saying, I'm doing something in this season too. But that being said, it really is fun and feels meaningful to really push, I guess. I mean, there's certain things like I love running a book club. I started it during my years at MLC with a professor and have seen value in continuing that mostly because not because I'm an expert at literature. I'll say this at the start of every book club meeting, like, I'm not the leader of this. I'm just a facilitator. I'm the guy that sends the emails and gets you here, and maybe picks the book, but, um, I'll ask a question if the conversation gets stuck, but otherwise, we're gonna bounce off each other, we're gonna talk. The reason that I run book clubs is to encourage myself to read. If I tell the entire SEM student body that I'm gonna read Dante's Inferno this year or Dante's Divine Comedies, well, then I better read Dante's Divine Comedies. And if people want to come along on that journey, then we're gonna have a blast. And every second that we spend doing something like that is gonna make us not only better future pastors, but better rounded individuals. So I'm rambling now, but that is kind of the philosophy, is that lots of tiny actions repeated over and over again on a consistent basis, whatever they compound to truly incredible amounts of growth and experience that you're able to garner over years.
So what are you doing like right now? You're running a book club, you're doing seminary, you're being a good husband, trying to be a good husband, working on it, getting there. Like, what are the little things you're focused on right now?
Yeah. I'm writing music every single day. So whether it's 5 words, a line, an entire chorus, or a whole song, every single day I am writing music. And I have no agenda with that. I'm just doing it. And it's produced fruit in some cool ways, but a lot of it will just be in my journal. But it's devotional, it's cathartic, it's kind of a creative expression. So that's one. Reading books all the time, not just for book club, but listening to books at work, in the car, on the way to school in the morning. I have a 7-minute drive. There's an audiobook on during the 7-minute drive. I am intentionalizing community during what I hate to admit, but what is objectively the busiest year of my entire life. Somebody told me the way to win middler year is to not stop going to things because you're busy with school. And I took that advice and I took it right to heart. And we've tried it this year and it's made us pull our hair out a couple of times, but it's been so worth it. So saying yes to lots of things that I truly want to do and not letting school get in the way. And then I think this has been a goal the whole year, is just trying to keep my messaging to myself and to others positive. I'm by nature a bit of a cynical realist type of person, and so it'd be easy for me this year to just be whining about, this or that all the time, and I still have my days. I've definitely whined to you a few times. Generally speaking, when people ask me how I'm doing, I don't want the song I'm singing to be busy but good. I don't want that to be the mantra of my 2024 to 2025. If that's all I was this year, then I probably wasted my time and a lot of other people's time. So, trying to be really honest about with myself and with other people who ask about the ways that God's blessing me and those around me this year, and trying to throw at my brother's faces here and there too. Like, you've got homework? Well, that's okay. Like, we're at the seminary. Caleb Lindholm, shout out to Caleb Lindholm. Like 3 times a week, he leans over to me and he just like grabs me by the shoulder and he's like, "Bro, we're at the seminary." And I'm just like, "You're living your dream right now. and you're reminding me that I'm living, you know, some version of my dream too. Like, it is good for us to be here, and that's so important to have a dude like that.
I know that I am annoying people and making them roll their eyes every time that I say I'm living the dream.
Yeah.
And I tell everybody all the time I am living the dream because I honestly can't think of anything else I would rather be doing right now than exactly this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I spent the first, you know, 15 years of my adult life trying to do what like, I thought maybe the most meaningful thing was, or like, what would get me where I wanted to go, or I don't even know how to describe it. Just like doing what I thought I should do instead of figuring out a way to do what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
And the pushback you'll get on that every once in a while is something to the effect, well, not everybody gets to do what they want to do. But then I think about my great grandfather, called him Gramps, right? Bud Matthias. He would wake up every morning. When he was a young man, he was a caretaker on somebody else's $1 million property, which in the 30s and 40s and 50s, $1 million property is a property, right? And then around the time that my grandmother, who was the oldest of his children, was going off to school, like elementary school and middle school, he started working at the American Motor Company, or no, the Pontiac, whichever one, at one of the big car companies that was in Kenosha at the time. He would drive a half an hour into work every day. He would work 9+ hours a day on an assembly line, just mind numbing, boring work that breaks your body. Drive home and do it again. And he's the happiest man I've ever known in my entire life. And he loved every minute of being in that factory. Shouldn't say that. He didn't tell me in so many words. I loved every minute of it.
Sure.
But what he did love is he loved his daughters and he loved his wife and he eventually loved his grandchildren and he loved the life that he was able to give them and the life that he was able to live because of the work that he did, and that work gave him meaning. And so it's not that I love doing exegesis. I'll let you in on a secret. I do not enjoy doing exegesis. I do not enjoy parsing Greek verbs. It is a nightmare. I do not enjoy reading 400 pages in a single night and trying to write a report on it. I do not enjoy trying to remember what a professor said in a class 2 months ago so I can regurgitate it on a test. What I do love is the people of God. What I do love is when I'm able to spit facts on a podcast or from a pulpit or something like that. What I do love is what I'm being prepared to do.
Mm.
Right? And what I do love is the way that this is having an impact on my mind and on my heart. And so we'll get into this as we talk about the book. And this is a great segue to the book anyway. But it it's not what I, might as well just get into the book because this is one of the main themes from the book, right? Is my situation does not dictate my state of being.
Mhm.
My situation doesn't dictate my state of being. I'm curious, Cameron, you brought this book up to me. You listened to it and you said, we need to talk about it because we already had a podcast planned.
Yeah.
That we were going to do a podcast. And you said, hey, this is what we should talk about. And so now I've listened to it 3 times through in the last 10 days because I love it. I'm really glad you made me listen to it. And 2, it's kind of exactly what I needed to hear
Mhm.
anyway. One of the reasons why I needed to hear it was confirming that I was doing some things right already also,
Yeah.
which is a wonderful feeling to have.
Mhm.
But tell me, why did you want to talk about this book?
Yeah. I think the reason that this book kinda stood out to me and struck me so hard when I was listening to it was because it makes so much sense. I was working in a factory when I was listening to this book. It was during a day where I was just feeling really sorry for myself, and it had been not a great day. I was feeling a little sick, was feeling very stressed. I had a whole pile of stuff that I needed to figure out when I was gonna do it and how I was gonna do it. I was feeling like kind of a crappy husband that day. It's hard sometimes, especially when you have a lot of stuff to do, to go home and see your wife who maybe that day did some laundry, got some groceries. She's already doing more than her fair share of the household things, and she's doing that because she knows it makes my life easier as a seminarian. And then I have to look her in the eyes and say, "I'm gonna be in the office for 3 hours tonight studying," and that feels like garbage. So, I was feeling very sorry for myself because of all this, and just moping, and then I get to the factory, and they tell me what I'm doing that day, and it's these rings that are almost closed, and I'm just holding them up to an automatic welding machine, and it's closing them and welding them, and I'm doing that over and over again for 4.5 hours. 3 months ago, I was doing furniture reupholstery for my job. Every day I was
Which is
making
something my understanding is you've grown to be pretty passionate
I
on and
loved
enjoy.
it. I
Yeah.
loved it. I was making creative decisions about what fabrics to use, working with clients, all this stuff, making like learning every single day how to do this job better. It was something that I got like unreasonably passionate about. Furniture store went out of business, and so I got a job at this factory, which, by the way, I do generally speaking love a lot, but it can be pretty mind-numbing in comparison. So I'm feeling sorry for myself already. I'm doing a menial task that a monkey could probably do for 4.5 hours. And the huge benefit of this job is that I get to have an earbud in my ear, listening to whatever I want. And so I listened to a sermon, and in the sermon, which was a sermon, I can't remember which one, but it was by John Mark Comer, and he referenced this book in his sermon. And so finished the sermon and immediately went, and it was available on Libby, got it right away, started listening to it. And I'm sitting there in the factory feeling sorry for myself, and Viktor Frankl starts talking about his time in Auschwitz. And I slowly, well, maybe very quickly, stopped feeling sorry for myself. You know, he had some absolutely horrific experiences there. Maybe right away it was one of the worst ones when they're brought into the camp and everyone's being divided into these different lines, and he's separated from his family. And he talks about the next day asking somebody where, I can't remember who it was, his father or his brother, where did he go? And they said, well, describe him. And he described him. I think his brother had some kind of physical impairment. And so the person who he was talking to said, your brother's over there. And he pointed at the crematorium smokestack. And Viktor Frankl realized in a moment, my family's dead. I was the able-bodied one who they said you can live and because you're worth something to us, which is labor until you get sick, and then we'll do the same to you. And so he says in his book, it's not a memoir, but there's a whole chunk of it that really is kind of his philosophical musings while he's in Auschwitz and then 3 other labor camps. And you hear him talk about these tragedies, but he's talking about them in such a measured, even keel sort of way. And it's really fascinating. And then you start to realize, like, this isn't just a guy who's come to grips with these horrific things. This is a guy who, even when he was there, was able to conceptualize all of these unimaginable, torturous situations because of the fact that something was driving him. And there was probably a few things you could point to as kind of his meaning that he found. One of them was that early on in his time in the labor camps, he had a manuscript of some of his writings about his logotherapy that he was developing even before he went to the labor camps, and a guard had discovered it, and he was pleading with him like, nobody else can complete this research, like, if this war ends, I need this so that I can finish it. And the guard ripped it up and stomped it into the mud. And then a few days later, maybe it was the same day, a short time later, he picked up this jacket off of a guy in his bunkhouse had died, and he picked up his jacket and he put it on, and in the pocket was a handwritten Shema prayer, which is the Jewish prayer that they pray in the morning when they wake up. And he realized in a moment, like, this was this man's hope. This was what tethered him to his life. Um, and he wrote it out so that he could have it. And so that was when he decided, I need to start reconstructing my entire manuscript, either in my head or whenever I can get my hand on papers to write. And so instantly now he has purpose. He doesn't have a family anymore. He doesn't have his identity as a person, but he has what he's able to create and what he hopes to do when all this is over, if that's ever going to happen. He talks about guys who would smoke their last cigarette and they wouldn't live 48 hours afterwards, because that last little thing of hope that they were saving for a special occasion, they would smoke it and it would be done. He talks about another guy who believed that he had special intel on when the war would end. And that day slowly approached, and Viktor was getting nervous because he liked this guy, and he started to realize, like, I don't think the war is gonna end. And sure enough, the day came, and the day came to an end. And that night, the man was struck by some kind of sickness, and within the next day, he was gone. And so, uh, a little bit before he went to the labor camps, but then also throughout his time there, Viktor Frankl starts to develop this idea that the ultimate need of man is to identify some kind of meaning. And he talks about two other psychologists, Freud and somebody else whose name I cannot remember in the moment.
Nietzsche, right?
Not Nietzsche.
No?
That's he does reference Nietzsche a lot, but so Freud said pleasure is man's ultimate need. Then there was another guy who said that power is man's ultimate need. And Frankl would say that it's meaning. And so then the whole, like, maybe second half, last 2/3 of the book is him kind of after the fact talking about logotherapy, and he's written other books about it too. But yeah, I think this goes so well with even the stuff we've talked about so far today that he Frankl says man's last or the last thing that a man can surrender is his ability to choose how he behaves during the course of his circumstances, or something along those lines. I'm probably butchering the quote, but I think that that's a beautiful thing to think about. It goes back to things I told you I was hearing even as a kid. My mom said, "What can you do to change this situation?" And I think when we're struggling or when things are good, going back to something that anchors us, that's going to pull us through the difficult times, and it's also gonna ground us in the really, really good times so that we don't get any ideas about it being because of our actions or because we're really starting to get good at this whole life thing. It all goes back to that source of meaning. And so I'm fascinated by this as a kind of life philosophy. And I'm also very fascinated by how this squares with our Christian worldview. Frankl was so close to knowing what we know, which is that we always live for something, for someone bigger than ourselves. The mystery of the gospel has been revealed to us. Christ has made those who are far near and has torn down the dividing wall of hostility that stood between us. And so we live for him. We live for the cause that he's given us, the grace of being able to go and preach good news to the poor, even though we're the ones that needed saving in the first place. And so it's so easy for me to kind of harmonize all of that in my brain, but I'm very curious about how to talk about logotherapy in a way that gives the philosophy itself its due, but then also does not divorce it from a Christian worldview, which is something that Frankl never even really considered to be a part of the whole picture.
Yeah. And the first thing that comes to my mind is this idea that happens a lot in Christian circles, at least in my experience, and it's totally anecdotal. But this idea of when somebody is struggling, the answer is usually something to the effect of like, well, Jesus loves you. Don't forget what Jesus did for you. And that's a valid statement. It's true. And it gives me great comfort and hope. But I'm also given far more than that. I'm given far, far more than that. And this is going to sound like heresy to some people, but taking a post-it note, writing a Bible passage on it, and sticking it to your problem isn't going to solve your problem most of the time. I look to the scriptures to find answers, and find answers to life's problems. And the answer to my greatest problem is that Jesus bled and died for me. And really, the foundation for every answer to every problem is that my Savior loves me and he proved it. Like God loves me and he proved it. But in a practical sense, especially when the days get dark and things get tough, we have more comfort to offer than just remember that Jesus loves you and everything's going to be okay. And there's a couple things to remember, I think, too. One is that everything's not always going to be okay. Like everything is not okay. It's not going to be okay until we stand face to face with our Heavenly Father.
Yeah.
everything until then is not gonna be okay. It just isn't. I'm beating a dead horse when I say this, but life sucks, and then at the end of life, you die, and that happens to everybody. So to blindly slap Band-Aids of, everything's gonna be okay because of Jesus on there. Is it true? Can I understand it as being true? Absolutely. I'm not trying to guilt anybody who's said such things in the past. However, we have much, much more comfort to offer than just that. And I think where Frankl goes that perhaps Christians ought to go more often is the idea that we have been given a free will and we have been given a divine mandate to exercise that free will. Now, we don't need to get into the dogmatics of like what exactly I mean by free will, but we can make choices in our lives. God gives us the responsibility to make our own choices throughout life. And the choices that we make have consequences, and the choices that we make can have either wonderful consequences or terrible consequences. And a lot of the time, the choices that we make are the reasons for the circumstances that there are exceptions to this. But for the most part, the choices that we make account for the circumstances that we experience. And that even goes for things that we cannot control. And you watch two people go through cancer treatments. One of them goes through cancer treatments with joy, one of them goes through cancer treatments with fear. There is a choice being made. And that's a hard truth, but it is a truth.
Absolutely. Yeah, one scene from the book that was particularly striking to me is the details are fuzzy, but there was some picture that was being circulated outside of the camps of it was a picture that was taken of the bunks in the sick on these bunks were just lined up all these guys that were sick with different things, and they're all very, very skinny, as like we've all seen these pictures, and the guys in the camp catch wind of the fact that this picture is circulating and that people's reaction was just horror and shock. And Frankl is like annoyed, and he goes on this tirade about like when I am sick in the camps, they give me the day off of my labors, and they give me a bunk to sleep on, and they give me brothers to keep warm next to, and I don't have to work again until I'm healthy. And this picture makes it seem like I'm in here suffering. And we look at that situation and we're like, yeah, that it is a horror. And that is held up as one of like the principal horrors of the last few centuries that you get chills even looking at any pictures of empty Auschwitz, much less anything else. But he's like defending the state that they were in almost because of the fact that it wasn't as bad as what some other people got. And he has that experience to know I've got people that bled the same blood as me who got way worse than I did. And because of the way that I feel about my purpose and the meaning that I have and the reasons that I'm here, he talks over and over again in the memoir section of his book about how he enjoyed the work that he did and that he was able to find purpose in waking up every day. And he made friends in the camps, like all these things that you don't hear about, and that somebody that wasn't there would never say, like, "Oh, but they made friends there." Like, but he says these things, and it sounds like they're at summer camp, not Auschwitz. And so you can't look away when a guy is writing these things. You can't not say, "What is he tapping into that I, an affluent America, can't somehow tap into?" And
Yeah, one of the things he said is freedom is not the absence of conditions, but the ability to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. And what you're, I mean, to be trite about what you just said, essentially he's looking around and he's going, well, this is better than yesterday.
yeah,
And it's better than tomorrow's probably going to be. So why wouldn't I appreciate it? Which is it just feels awful to talk about a concentration camp that way, but it's the reality that he lived. Yeah. I think perhaps one of the most powerful things that anybody can learn is the level of control, like to really understand the level of control I have over my own life. We imagine that we don't. I don't know if it's an American culture thing, I don't know if it's a worldwide thing, but the vast majority of people that I meet and deal with inside the church, outside the church, whatever age, the vast majority of people, unfortunately, see themselves as victims of their own circumstances. And they just don't realize that they're the ones in control. Like there are some things you just you can't control your genetics. You can't control what other people say and do, although you actually can to some extent, right? Even that isn't necessarily true. You can't control how tall you are. You can't control, you know, there's really very few things you cannot control to some degree. And just taking ownership of that can move a lot of things in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so freeing to that maybe there's a moment where it feels heavy when you first realize that. When you start to acknowledge the fact that the things that maybe weighed heaviest on me for the last year or whatever, like I could have affected change. I could have made different decisions that would have left me in a different place than where I ended up. Maybe that feels heavy for a moment, but then when you realize, but I want my life to look like this in a year. Well, what can I do today to make that happen? If you want to run a marathon, the first step is not running a marathon. I mean, some people could do that. More power to them. But if you want to run a marathon and that seems like an insurmountable task to you, then run a mile. Buy a fancy pair of running shoes. Take a measured step in the direction that you're trying to go, and then take another measured step every single day until you get there. That sounds so oversimplified, but it really, really is how it works. And I think Extreme Ownership by Jocko, I referenced it earlier. That book completely changed my life. Elliot, my brother, had to read it when he was working at Culver's. The owner of his Culver's made all the staff read that. And I remember he became obsessed with it and things would go wrong at home, like maybe it was our job to not do or it was our job to do the dishes and the dishes didn't get done and he would just say, "My fault," or things like that. And it was like to the point where it was annoying. It was like, dude, that it was really like our thing. He's like, "No, my fault." Extreme ownership. That's a stupid example, but like I'm going to completely claim culpability for this because I had the ability to do the thing or make the change. Um, and I didn't do it. I chose not to. People say all the time, "I'm too busy. I didn't have time." And if I said that growing up, I would be instantly corrected by my mother, and she would say, "You didn't make it a priority. You had time. You have time for anything you want. You didn't make it a priority." And that drove me crazy at the time, but now it drives me a little crazy when I hear people say they don't have time because I'm like, "Okay," like you'll never have time. You'll never have time. Um, but it all goes back to what lands at the top of your list of priorities. It all goes back to what matters most to you. And ultimately, Frankl would say, what gives your life a sense of meaning.
Yeah. I think I couldn't help but think about myself a little bit as I was reading, like just to bring it into like bringing Frankel's ideas out of the concentration camp and into like a real life. I saw this is gonna sound like kitschy and self-helpy, and it is. That's fine. Like I genuinely for decade, maybe more, just saw myself as a loser. Like I'm a screw up. I'm an F up. Like I won't. I don't want to ruin my own podcast. So I'm not going to say the word, but that's what that was like my self-talk. That's what I believed myself to be. In a lot of ways, I was. Like I had wonderful opportunities. You couldn't be raised in a better family. You couldn't have better opportunities than the opportunities that I had. Like the world at my fingertips, and just found ways to not make it work. Right. And like my teaching career got off to a disastrous start. Like the first school I was at, I was only there for 2 years. And when it was time for me to leave, it was time for me to leave. And I agreed with them. Like and then like, even like looking around, realizing I didn't have any friends. And the quote unquote friends I did have were getting me in trouble. And a strained relationship with everybody that had been important to me. And I, to I've told this story again and again as well. We just kind of looked around one day and said, like, I am not the man I wanted to be, like, not even close, like, nothing like what I imagined I was going to be at this point. And I'm not doing absolutely anything to move in that direction. So I've got two choices: keep doing what I've been doing or do something, like anything different. And I thank God for the guidance to do, you know, what I ought to have done, which is eventually why I eventually ended up here. But that attitude too of like, I'm a screw up. I'm a screw up. I'm a screw up. And there was a girl, the relationship did not work. But I, again, thank God for the time I got to spend with her, because there was a night, one specific night that I can think of, we were just like sitting in the car together. We'd been on a date. We're about to go our separate ways, but just chilling in the car for a little while, chatting. And I said something to the effect of like, well, if anybody really, I mean, if you really knew what I've got going on, I'm not so sure you'd still like me, right? And she's like, why do you say stuff like that? Excuse me. Like, why do you say stuff like that? And I essentially told her, like, well, I'm a screw up. I've always been a screw up. I'll probably always be a screw up, but at least I'm lovable. And she said, well, then stop being a screw up. I was like, I can do that? It never crossed my mind that I could just stop screwing up. Like tomorrow, wake up, go do it right. Like, just don't screw tomorrow up. And then when you go to bed at night, thank God for it. And the next morning, wake up and just don't screw that day up. And if you do screw a day up, then wake up the next morning and don't screw that day up. Like, I don't want to say it's not that hard, but it's not that hard, you know? And it's just recognizing that I do have ownership over my own life. I do have ownership over my.
Yeah. I think one of the big things is, and this is the crux of everything Frankl's saying, is identifying what that meaning is. And maybe more important even than recognizing that you have control and agency in your life is having like the self-respect to identify, or at least point to something in your life that already is there and say, this is the thing that's most important to me. It's really easy, and sometimes it can feel really comfortable to kind of just drift and just, especially, I mean, we are on an 8-year academic course. At the end of it, if all goes well, we get told where we're going to go and what we're going to do. And so like it would be so easy to kind of just go through the motions. And we've all had seasons that looked like that, more than they looked like chasing academic excellence or even outside of academics. But faithfulness is something we talk about a ton here at seminary. And I think that that's a word that's really useful, and maybe the Christian understanding of logotherapy is being faithful to the gifts that God's given you, being faithful to the opportunities that he's placed in your life, and then being faithful to the opportunity he's given you to, like we've talked about, have agency and say, out of all of the options that lay before me of how I could spend my time and my passions and my energy, this is the toil, as Ecclesiastes would say, that I'm going to spend my days doing in the sun. And it will be good. It'll be blessed by the Lord, because he's given us days to spend. As long as we're on earth here, we get to choose what things we're going to do to serve him and to glorify his name, to work for him in our corner of the kingdom. So I think taking a second, I'd encourage everyone who's listening to this to just kind of take a second, even if it's obvious, just acknowledge, like, in this season, in this 6 months, in this year, like, this is the thing. This is something that's been giving me meaning. And it's okay if that's something that is like faith adjacent. Like, I think that's the place I've landed kind of in my wrestling with this. My first reading, I was like, can the meaning that we're supposed to find be anything other than Jesus? Like, if it is that wrong? Is that a sin? And I don't think it is. I think when we talk about the doctrine of vocation, I think that you can make something like a focal point in your life, and it can be so saturated with who you are and whose you are, that that can be something that God has given you and that you get to hold in this lifetime, and you can hold it in a place that's not higher than him, but um, that it can receive a lot of your attention and your time and your energy, and that can be a really beautiful, God-pleasing thing. So I really think that's sort of where I'm circling around as I continue to wrestle with this. I think finding that as a Christian is a really powerful.
the purpose is there one unifying purpose for all Christians, do you think?
I think it's to be known by Christ and to make Christ known.
Now, what does that look like practically speaking for a Christian who's not in called ministry?
Well, to be known by Christ is a fact. We are. So I think that for a lot of us people studying to be pastors included, the being known by Christ part a lot of times is reminding ourselves whose we are. And so, I mean, this is an ever changing thing for me as far as like who I have in my life, who's reminding me that Jesus is my savior and who's feeding me spiritually. I really haven't belonged to a church as much as I want to, for the last however many years just because of how often we move. But the Christian community you surround yourself with, I've gotten to be in a marriage group this year with two other couples. That's just been so important to as a grounding force in my marriage and also in my faith. Um, Finding a personal Bible study routine that works for you, big, small, you know, whatever that works for you. And that might mean it works for you this month and the next month it looks different. That's really important. Finding ways to saturate your lifestyle with Jesus, whether that means making a making tough decisions about the media or the content that you're allowing to take up space in your head and in your heart, whether that means intentionalizing content and books and other things that are going to build you up. I kind of put all of that in the being known by Jesus category. So, and obviously then being in the means of grace too, that's the ultimate. But all those other things are little things that we can more easily affect outside of the hour every Sunday that we're in church. Then there's the make Christ known part, and that is something that I can't prescribe to everyone individually on this podcast. But I'll tell you, even though I'm studying to be a pastor, that part for me has mostly not been doing pastoral things so far. Certainly some of it has, but I find that the biggest way that I can make Christ known in my life, I think, using my gifts is creating community. I think because I'm extroverted, because I really like people and also like I just get that high off of bringing people I love into the same place and investing in them and feeling them reciprocate. Whether it's a community around books or music or coffee or whatever, that's a way that I think that I can make Jesus known and maybe help people know that they're known, um, and the rest. So I think it's totally different for every person, but I do think that's gonna be wrapped up in what their meaning is, to use Frankl's word.
I think in some way too, you simply ask the question, how would somebody who's in love with Jesus do this?
Yeah,
Was he doing graphic design or building houses, or you're an alcohol salesman who's traveling the world and selling wine? How would somebody who loves Jesus approach this?
yeah,
Right. I think that's a big part of it, is just always asking that question. And that really starts to shape the way you behave, the way you act then.
yeah,
And you think about that all the time. Like, what if I had, a crucifix tattooed on my forehead so that everybody knew I represent Christ? I'm an ambassador for Christ. How would I behave? And I'm just going to act like that all the time. That's just what I'm going to do. I'm going to act like that all the time. When I'm dealing with, I'm not married yet, but when I'm dealing with my wife, I've got Christ tattooed on my forehead, and I'm going to show her how Christ loves her.
yeah,
When I'm dealing with customers, this is how God does business. This is how, like, imagine that you can go to Joseph's carpenter shop in Nazareth and see Jesus behind the counter. This is how Jesus deals with people. Same thing in like all of your relationships, whatever you're doing. That doesn't necessarily give you like, that'll give you a small purpose, like maybe lowercase p purpose. Capital P purpose, I think some of that is just the question of like, what makes you go? Like
yeah,
what what gives you meaning? It's a question that answers itself, but what gives you meaning? And some of those things come to us naturally. If you have a spouse, you are the one on whom they depend.
yeah,
There's just no escaping that. And if not the guy to give marriage advice, but if your marriage isn't going well, perhaps, just maybe, if you could be Christ to the other person, just maybe things would be better.
Mhm.
And that's not easy. It's impossible. It's an impossible standard. But if you find yourself not being able to hold down a job, then next time you got a job, do the job the way Christ would do the job,
Yeah.
and so forth. If you don't have any of those things to cling to, I mean, there are people in your life, like there's just isn't anybody that doesn't have somebody in their life, right? You might not have close family, you might not have a significant other, you might not have children, you might not have whatever, but there are people in your life. Like you do go to work somewhere. If you don't go to work somewhere, then you do something with your time, and that's your question then. Like, what can I do today? I wasn't gonna go where you went, and I'm really happy that you went where you went. How do I make Christ known today? This it's cliche, but it's cliche for a reason. When Luther wrote about vocation, he asked the question, like, how does a housewife make Christ known, or how does a housewife glorify God? She doesn't glorify God by making crosses in the dust as she sweeps the floor. She sweeps the floor really, really well and does it to God's glory.
Yeah. I love
Like the
that.
Christian shoemaker doesn't make shoes with crosses on them. He makes really, really good shoes and he does it for God's glory. And God is glorified in it. And so you know, I don't know if the shoemaker is passionate about making people's feet feel better. Perhaps he is, perhaps he isn't. But I'm going to give you value for your dollar, right? You're going to buy my shoes. You're going to get a good value for those. This is the best value I can give you for those shoes, right? And somebody, we hope, would ask the question then, why do you do this? And then I have an answer for the hope that I have.
I think a place where this is exemplified is on choir tour when we get to be hosted by Christians from churches all over the country. And all these people, I mean, one of my favorite parts is just hearing their stories of how they got to live where they are, what they do for work, what their role is in the church, and you just get to hear so many different perspectives and stories of people's journeys to that church, maybe even journeys to come to know Jesus. And I think what I kind of walk away with every day when, you know, they drop us off at the bus and we say, "Thanks for hosting us. It was so great to meet you," is like, my goodness, like they were so good at loving me and showing love to me because of the fact that I came to their church to sing to them about Jesus and they also love Jesus. Like that is the church on display. And I think that on a much more abstract scale than when you take that and you apply it to your life. I love what you said about how it doesn't need to be so explicit. It can really just be serving God with what you've got. I think maybe on a more like practical scale, I don't want to say that we're divorcing it from the evangelistic perspective that I introduced. But I think some of the hardest times for me in my adult life at seminary or in college were times when I got just caught in the routine of a mundane pattern that I didn't feel like I chose. And so a great example of that would be our first year at the seminary. I, I mean, the daily routine is really you go to school, you go to work, you do homework, and you repeat. And you have varying amounts of sleep in the middle there. And I love seminary, and so for a while, I can do that, and it can feel awesome. But then after a couple months, I started to feel like, what is my identity anymore? Like, I feel like I'm just a seminarian, and I like that, but I'm Cameron. And what I realized then and what I will tell people now if they describe a similar situation to me is you have to find the things that make you feel like you. Like, if you were to draw a picture of yourself and right next to it all of the things that are the definition of who Charlie is, and maybe you write 30, seminarian would probably be one of them, and then there'd be 29 other things. And there are small ones and big ones, but some of those things, if you were doing them on a daily basis, they'd be making you feel more like you than just being a seminarian would. And that's not necessarily gonna make you a worse seminarian. In fact, it's gonna make you exist in this space as a better rounded person a better rounded example of who you actually are, who God made you, the gifts that He's given you, the opportunities that He's been fostering in your life, and you've been able to take advantage of over the years, and now you're existing here in this moment with all of that in your tool bag, and to leave your tool bag in your dorm room and go to class would be a ridiculous notion. And so that's what I learned that year, was that I need to be all of that. I don't need to be all of that all the time. I don't need to put effort into all of those little vocations all the time, but I do need to make sure that those things that make me feel like me are happening. So for me, that's waking up in the morning and reading fiction before school. Like, that is my little solace time. And often a personal Bible study at the end of that, and then I'm ready to go. That is that if I'm never listening to music for the sake of listening to music during my week, that's something I'm gonna miss. For my wife, if she doesn't get to the gym a few times a week, she's gonna go stir crazy. And then we get to this place where we start to wonder, like, "Man, why don't I feel like myself?" And a person looking at us who knows us really well could very honestly and bluntly say, "How could you possibly feel like yourself? You haven't been doing any of the things that Charlie does."
Man, you're striking me right in the middle of the chest right now. I just blew a hole in my chest. Just to take that and make it personal, since you put my name on it anyway. Like I was thinking about that. Like what would if there was going to be a portrait of Charlie and you're going to write a couple things next to it? What would I want it to say? And overwhelmingly, if somebody else was going to draw a picture of me and write something next to it, all I wanted to say is Charlie loves me. That's all I wanted to say. I wanted to say anything else. Now you take that, like there's maybe a handful, yeah, maybe 3 or 4 guys who I can honestly say today would probably write that. And I'm in control of that. I can frankly, I've been in a funk for a couple of weeks. And that's the question is that what I'm doing? Not in the last 2 weeks. But that's what I want. I mean, there have been wonderful moments in my life where I've done that and they're glorious.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of moments in my life where I haven't done it. I'm a sinner. It doesn't work that way. But yeah, I I dig it. I think too and this ties in with what I just said. I don't know where I heard it. It's a quote from a book somewhere, but the advice was instead of looking around the world and saying, what does the world need? And figuring out what the world needs and then becoming that, which is the way a lot of people approach life. I mean, that's the way you go through college, a lot of people, right? Like, well, we need more pharmacists. So I'm going to study pharmacy and be a pharmacist, right? That's usually the way people approach life. But instead of doing that, look around, be honest, and say, what makes me come alive? And then do what it takes to be able to do that. Not necessarily for work, but what do I need to do? What do I need to put in place? How do I live life so that I can do that thing? And I've got a friend who's a pastor out west, and he loves snowboarding. Loves snowboarding. He's had a couple of calls to leave the congregation and go other places. He loves snowboarding. He's not going to go to Florida because he wants to snowboard. He's not going to go somewhere else because he loves to snowboard. Is there perhaps, this may be a bad example, but is there perhaps a congregation that better suits his niche? Is there perhaps a congregation that wants to do more of the things that he wants to do with his ministry and with his life and so forth? Like he's a husband to a wife that loves to ski, and I think they have 5 kids, and they love skiing and snowboarding, every single one of them. And where they live right now, they can do that 8 months out of the year. Why would you leave? Right? And he's not a professional snowboarder. None of their kids are probably going to be. I don't know. I can't say that for sure. But they have something, and this is a trite example again, but they have something they love. They do what it takes so that they can do the thing that they love. A couple of years, like when I got here, I maybe watched too many. I watched too many seasons of Yellowstone or something. I'm not sure, but I decided I wanted to be a cowboy. And I was thinking about like what do I want to do for summer work, and none of this ended up panning out quite the way I wanted. But you know what? I have always wanted to work with horses. Never really had the opportunity. Like there were maybe 3 or 4 times where I've really interacted with a horse in my entire life. I've got a summer where all I'm doing is selling beer for the summer, made good money doing it, didn't need a second job. In fact, the people like the professors here told me, don't get a second job, just enjoy having some time off. So I'm sitting around my dorm room trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my spare time. And I thought, you know what? I wanted to do this for so long. You drive 15 minutes up to Cedarburg, there's a dozen ranches and horse farms. So I started calling them up and emailing them and just said, hey, I I've never worked with horses. I've done some work with livestock, but never worked with horses before. I know my way around most machinery to some degree, and I work my butt off, and I don't mind shoveling poop or whatever it is. I'm just looking for somewhere where I can cut a deal where I come work for you a couple hours a week and we can trade it for riding lessons. Just give me time in a saddle. I did it for 3 or 4 months. Ended up not having, like, once school started, I didn't have time to do it anymore.
Yeah.
Called them up, said, sorry, I can't do it anymore. And the deal was off, and off we go. I wanted to ride a horse.
Yeah,
Turns
that's
out I'm too
sweet.
big. No, I'm not too big to ride a horse. I'm too big to fall off a horse. Yeah. But like now I can fairly confidently get on a well-broken horse. Keyword's well broken, right?
And you did
And
it. You went and did it. Yeah,
something that has no bearing on the rest of my life. Like, what are
man.
the chances that I'm gonna need to ride a horse someday?
Yeah.
Very, very small. What are the chances that I'm gonna need to know how to feed horses or care for horses or muck out horse stalls anytime else in the rest of my life? Very, very small. Always wanted to do it, found a way to do it, and I loved it. Didn't love riding as much, like I said, didn't love riding as much as I thought I was going to, but love horses,
Mhm.
love being around horses, love mucking out. I like shoveling poop. I must say it. I enjoy mucking out horse stalls. There's ways to find purpose and meaning other than abandoning my entire life and going to find something new. Right? I think a lot of times when we talk about finding my purpose, what people hear is I don't like my life and I'm going to build a new life. And then when they, which is true, I guess that is kind of what you're doing. But then they imagine like cold turkey big changes. I don't like my job, or I don't like where I'm at in life, so I'm going to quit my job, find a new career, have my midlife crisis at 25, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
What do I want to do? What makes me excited? What gets me going? And how can I make that happen? And God will go with you as you do that also. And he will bless it. And even if you don't necessarily get to do the things you wanted, like it would be cool if I could still spend some time with horses. Although I should say, if I wanted to work part time at any of those places, they would hire me. So I guess it's just that I value making money selling beer more than I value the time with the horses, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But those are all choices. That's control that I have.
You decide that you wanna do this thing long term. If you wanna set a big goal and dream big, then make a plan. Yeah, I think just giving yourself a chance. I mean, self-talk could be a whole thing. You touched on it earlier. It's something I've struggled with too. But giving yourself the credit. Sometimes when in our house, when me or my wife is being too hard on ourselves, one of us will say to the other person, "Hey, that's my spouse you're talking to." And I think that's so powerful. Like, Jesus thought you were worth it, and so you, like, darn well better think you're worth it too, 'cause you say you serve him. You say you're studying, you've gone to all this extensive effort because you wanna be a pastor and serve him. Well, then let him do what he's doing, and part of that might be through the goals that you set, the plans that you make, the things that you do. In my teenage years, most of my life philosophies were based on Switchfoot lyrics. Switchfoot is a fantastic
You
band.
you could do worse.
I'm wearing a Switchfoot jacket right now,
That's
actually.
awesome.
But there's a song called "World You Want," "The World You Want." Again, I'm not gonna stand by behind the theology of Switchfoot all the time necessarily, and this could be a larger discussion, but the lyrics, I think, are inspiring, and I do say them to myself sometimes. The chorus says, "Is this the world you want? Is this the world you want? You're making it. Every day you're alive." And then the bridge is, "What you say is your religion. how you say it's your religion, all your silence your religion, and it just keeps on going and going and going. And religion in the broad sense there, meaning like this is all of the things that you're doing. It tells a story that you're preaching a sermon with your life. What sermon are you preaching? Are you preaching a sermon of I'm here and that's good enough? And maybe it is. Are you preaching a sermon of I really want this thing and I'm willing to do what it takes to get that thing? Yeah, that's an interesting line of thought, I think, for us to take honestly for ourselves. And the best part is, like we said earlier, you have agency to respond to whatever conclusion you draw from your answer to that question. How did today go? Not great. Okay, well, good thing his mercies are new every morning, and the sun's going to rise tomorrow, and you're going to draw a new breath and grace, and get a chance to walk with Jesus again. Find your meaning and get after it.
One of the things that we haven't talked about yet, and this is my fault. See how I owned that? Anyway, one of the things we haven't talked about yet, and it's my fault, is one of the major themes is easier or more comfortable doesn't equal better.
Yeah.
And throughout Frankl's writing, easier or more comfortable is not the same thing as better. And a lot of the things that you and I have been talking about is things that take effort. And we've been talking about effort a lot. Like you have to do something. The question I'll ask you, and I have something to say about it too, but the question I'll ask you first is what is the danger of seeking comfort over purpose or making comfort my purpose, do you think?
Yeah.
Is there a danger in that? What is the danger in that?
There's a huge danger in that. I think that was going back to some of my struggles with mental health. I think that's one of the reasons that I ended up getting off of medication. And I'm not condemning anyone's use of medication. It just wasn't for me. But what it did to my emotions was it took them, if this is the spectrum of my emotions, it took them right here. And I think people that know me as someone who feels things deeply, for better or for worse. And that's something that I love about myself. I think it synergizes with a lot of my spiritual gifts. And so to remove that from who I am, it felt like a crime. It felt like I was a different human being. But in some ways, it was really nice too. I could kind of just drift through my days and exist, and I wasn't plagued by these huge mood swings anymore. I didn't have like discernible emotions at all. And so comfort would be the word for that. And there are less dramatic examples of that too, that we want to feel good. And so much of the conversations surrounding mental health or how we interact with culture or the people around us, we want to feel good. We want to remove people from our life that are toxic. We want to do things to make my life as good as it can be. Good not meaning filled with rich meaning and robust opportunities to learn from my mistakes and about myself, but good as in life is good, I'm having fun. And I don't mean to minimize anyone's personal kind of journey with this stuff because it really does look different for everybody. But what Frankl's whole thesis is, and what we believe as Christians, we talk about the theology of the cross, that the cross is a gift for a believer. Not just Jesus' cross is a gift for us, but our personal crosses, the things that we get to carry as humans in light of grace and who Christ is. There are opportunities for us to learn and to grow, to understand our Savior better, and to understand who He is for us better. It's okay if I'm weak because His power is made perfect in my weakness. And so I think it is dangerous to be pain averse because every time that you feel pain is an opportunity to grow.
And pain, and he makes a big point of saying pain without purpose is just madness. I can't remember the word that he uses, but like pain, it's not just pain in general.
Yeah.
But pain for a purpose has meaning, and we're okay with it. And to an extent, it's a good thing. Like it's a good thing to strive valiantly in pursuit of something meaningful.
And pleasure without purpose is folly.
Yeah.
You
Absolutely.
will become a dopamine addict, and there's 8 different podcasts in there, for all the different ways that can manifest itself. But like I said earlier, your meaning grounds you in the great times and it anchors you in the really hard times. It informs it's your course, it's the common thread, the course of action through it all. Because when you have a meaning, Nietzsche says something along the lines of when you know what your why is, your how becomes a much less significant factor. That you're not gonna if there's stories of women lifting cars off of their children because in a moment that it needed to happen, that's what needed to happen. When you decide that you want to be a pastor and you're willing to do whatever it takes to get to Vicar year, you're gonna whine about your dog paper less. Like it's just gonna be the case because it's worth it. Because you've decided that I'm committing to myself, to my God, to my professors, to my friends, that this is what we're doing. And when we all stand at the finish line and look back, we're gonna be really glad that we had meaning instead of kind of just drifting from thing to
Yeah.
thing.
You've heard me say this a bunch of times, and again, I'm probably annoying all of my buddies with it. But you're familiar with the poem "The Bear Hunt," right? The little song that you do with the kids. And there is no question in my mind where I'm trying to go. I want to be a pastor. I want to get the Vicar year. I want to get through Vicar year, and I want to get the opportunity to be a pastor someday. Since that's not a negotiable, I can say to myself, like when tough stuff comes, I will say to myself or say to somebody else, can't go over it, can't go under it, just got to go through it. And off we go. Can't go over it, can't go under it, got to go through it. What I will also often recite to myself is the Be Strong poem. Are you familiar with the Be Strong poem?
I think I am, yes.
Pete Badcock says, be strong. Oh boy, now I forgot the first line. Be strong. We are not here to play, to dream, to drift. We have hard work to do and loads to lift. Shun not the struggle. Face it, 'tis God's gift. Be strong. Say not the days are evil, who's to blame? And fold your hands and acquiesce, oh shame. Stand up, speak out, and bravely in God's name. Be strong. It matters not how deep entrenched the wrong, how hard the battle goes, the day how long. Faint not, fight on. Tomorrow comes the song. There is no such thing as meaningful work that doesn't have a purpose, or a purpose that isn't going to have a meaningful work that accompanies it. It just is what we are and who we are. In fact, you can tie that back to creation in the fall. The mandate to work came before sin came into the world. God made man to work. And the fact that we don't want to work or that work is hard is simply a consequence of sin. It does not change the fact that your God-given purpose is to do stuff. So go do stuff and recognize that you are being sanctified and guided and given purpose by the God who made you and created you for the work and prepared good work in advance for you to do. He's the one that's equipping you to go do the things that he's chosen for you to go do. And now what you do through life is walk around, look around, and figure out, like, well, what do I want to do? And what you decide you're going to do is what God has prepared in advance for you to do. So go do it, and go do it well, and go do it boldly. Go do it full of love, with love for your Savior and for the people you're doing it for. You're not going to have a lack of purpose or meaning. And one of the fascinating things that Frankl talked about a little bit, but I've also heard elsewhere, is the reality that people who are highly religious have a far higher chance of survival in just about any situation. So whether it's like cancer treatment or like car accidents or like even violent assaults and things like that, people have a far higher chance of survival if they're deeply religious. And that's true for any religion. Now, you take that, and now there are only two religions in the world. There's one that says you do stuff to make God love you, and he does. And there's one that says your God did stuff so that you could be with him forever. How much more peace do I have knowing that the prize is already mine? Like the prize at the finish line is already mine. The race has already been won, and all I'm doing is getting to the finish line. And I'm promised that if I drop dead right now, then that's the finish line. Like I can't miss the finish line. The finish line is the only thing in life that's certain, and it's death. And death is victory for me because of what Christ has done for me. How can I lose? How can I be a loser? Like it's impossible to lose at the game of life if I know Christ and I know what comes at the end of it.
Amen.
Awesome. Well, we have a denim-themed party to go to, Cameron, so we had better go join our friends. It's been a blast to have you on, man.
Been a great
I love
conversation.
you, dude. I
Love
love
you
being
too.
around you. Here's the other thing that I will say that is unrelated. Well, it gets kind of like peripherally related to things we've talked about here is Cameron and I are not like best friends, right? And this is a great example of what like peripheral friendships can be like
Yeah.
and how and why they can be meaningful. You don't have to be best friends with a dozen people.
Mhm.
Right? You can maintain good, meaningful friendships with a dozen people or more. And just to be intentional about sitting down every once in a while, finding something in common to talk about, and sit down and enjoy each other's company for a while. Now, granted, we did it in front of cameras, but wonderful to sit down with you. Look forward to the next time we get to do it.
Absolutely, brother.
Yeah. Everybody else, thank you for watching the show. As I said before, there's an opportunity down in the show notes below to help support the work that we do here at Gird Up. Please consider donating a cup of coffee. All that being said, I love you guys. God bless you all. We'll talk to you next week.